Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations to provide landowners valuable information you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus is on solely landowner representation, and I do stress solely landowner representation. I am here to work with, help, assist, and represent landowners and only landowners, and hopefully provide you with information that will serve you well in any of the discussions or interactions with the gas company. And even if you have a different attorney, maybe things to think about or question him or her about as well. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus, like I say, is solely landowner representation, and I represent clients. I've done hundreds upon hundreds of individual gas lease negotiations, pipeline and water line agreements. I love to say this just because I do find it amazing. I have not, and not that I'm amazing. I'm not saying that. That's not something that I would say. But what I'm talking about is the amount of development that we're seeing out there, and that we're exposed to as Pennsylvania landowners. And what we see is a lot of pipeline activity, and that's something that's going to continue for years. And unfortunately, as much as I talk about this week in and week out, people are signing very, very bad pipeline agreements. And gas and pipeline companies are not telling people the things that they need to know. And why would they? Because they work for the gas and pipeline companies. So one of the things that I implore everybody, if you are approached to sign any document, before you sign, you can always contact me. I will let you know. We'll let you know whether we can assist you. And then you can decide, is this something that you need assistance with? But I don't want to make this a big commercial. I want to make sure that everybody understands that if you are approached to sign an agreement, the landman works for the company. I'm a broken record on that, but I'm going to keep doing it because just this past week, multiple people came in, talked to multiple people, and they feel that they were very misled in this prior negotiation process. So we see it all the time, and I see it occur literally just about every day. So anyway, at the Clark Law Firm, again, I represent people for gas lease negotiations, pipeline, water line agreements, well pad agreements, roadways to the well pad. And I'm going to talk some about that today, well pads and roadways to well pads, because that's something I see as being a hot issue recently. And I get a lot of calls, and it's something that I've had some new clients recently on well pad representation. So we're going to talk about that some today. Also, amendments and modifications of your existing gas lease. So if a company comes to you and they say, hey, we would like to amend or modify your existing gas lease and change some terms, again, not something you should simply just sign. You need to understand what is being requested, and you need to make sure that you're taking advantage the best you can of your situation. Also, doing more and more estate planning, and it's something too, the estate planning is something I'm really starting to shift and do some more estate planning, and going to be doing more and more of that work as my longtime clients and other Pennsylvania landowners have transitioned and are transitioning into this royalty phase. We want to make sure that you have an estate plan that's in place for you, not that this cookie cutter plan out there that is just very basic that says if I die, everything to my wife, and if we die together, everything to our children. That may work in some cases, but in many cases, that may not be what you want. Just recently, I just had another client. I think I've told the story before, and I won't go too deep, and I won't get too specific. But I had a client who had some acreage in what I know to be a very good area for production of natural gas, and this person was going to leave a very large portion of their estate and potential royalties to, and I'm certainly not against animal shelters or anything, but it was a certain dog rescue, a certain kind of dog, a certain breed. So one of the things that we talked about, and it's fine, but to make sure that this individual understood that, hey, you may see, this may be millions of dollars, and that may be what you want, but you need to make sure that you understand that that's the type of gift that you may be providing here. So instead of, and if you want to do that, that's great, but you need to understand these things so you're making the right choices. uninformed choices can often be the wrong choices. So we want to make sure that you make an informed, educated choice, and you're going to make the right decision for you. So we say, okay, for this particular person, when they say, wow, I didn't realize that it could be this type of money, and I think that I could give maybe a percent, maybe even half of the money to this certain dog rescue charity, but I'll give the other half to my church, or I'll give some to another organization that I support and I would like to see funded. And this person didn't have heirs or beneficiaries, so they were really looking to give their estate to various charitable organizations. So it's just something, again, if that's what you want to do, hey, that's great, but you have to understand your situation. Likewise, a lot of these older wills and estate plans aren't designed and weren't contemplating this type of potential wealth or wealth whenever they were designed. So you want to be very careful. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do where you can break apart your subsurface, your oil and gas estate, meaning what rights you have in that oil and gas, and you can break it down. It's similar to, you see companies where they sign, say Chesapeake always assigns or sells a portion of their lease to Statoil, the portion of their ownership. And you'll see this, and we see it more and more, these assignments. And sometimes, we see companies that break down the lease as far as not just like a Chesapeake Statoil. Another very common one is Chesapeake, Anadarko, Statoil, and Mitsui. And what happens there is each company has an interest in the gas company portion of the lease. Make this simple. And what I mean by this, and I'm off track, but I think this is important for everyone. So you have a lease. We'll say you sign a lease and make it easy numbers. You sign, you get 15% royalty. The company that you sign with, the lease says that they get 85% royalty. Well, as you go forward, it is extremely common that the company who signed with your lease, let's say they keep it at least in part, and what they do is they'll assign or sell a portion of their 85% of the lease. So remember, they signed a lease with you. They get 85% of the royalties. You as the landowner get 15%. Well, of that 85%, they'll assign a portion of their ownership in the lease. So, say, make it simple, they gave 50% to a different company and they keep 50%. Well, you as a landowner will typically now get royalty checks from those two companies. But it can get much more complicated than that. I just give you the example. Another very common exchange or assignment we see in certain areas, and there's a specific area in the map you can look at these and you can figure these out, where Chesapeake will stick with this example. They assign a portion of their lease to Statoil. They assign a portion of the lease that they own, their share, to Anadarko, and then also Mitsui. And it can even get more complicated, and there can be more companies involved. But that's what the company does with their 85% of the lease. It is very common that they assign, transfer, or sell a portion of the lease once they know they're going to keep it and develop it. It's probably more common that we see ownership from the company side split up than actually the company keep 100%. I'd say we probably see that more often. The company, meaning, what I mean is the company splitting their lease and selling off a portion to another company, and usually that's done so the company who had the lease will, or had 100%, they'll sell a portion so they can get some immediate money, immediate capital to fund their operations, to fund their drilling operations, to allow them to go in other areas, to go ahead and explore, to purchase leases, all of those different types of things. And we see that, again, Chesapeake is just an example and very, very common. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I am here every Sunday on these stations from 8 to 9 a.m. to get you this information. Now, another thing I want to stress here before I go to the ownership issue, you check out the website. Go to pagasleaseattorney.com. These sites are up now. It's been up for many years. I think we're going into our fifth year, but just did a major revamp, renovation. Very excited, and I want to thank the people who, people have called in and complimented the site. People have sent emails. Really appreciate it. Trying to get, whether you become a client or you don't become a client, that's okay. We'd love to be, I'd love to represent you, but I understand, I can't represent everybody, and not everybody needs representation. But the goal obviously is to generate business for me. I'm always upfront about that, but at the same time, I want to make sure the people are informed and they're thinking about the right things. So go check out pagasleaseattorney.com, also pipelineattorney.com. I've been dedicating my recent attention to also working on renovating and updating the pipeline site. So that's going to be a new site up and coming soon. It's going to be the same site as far as the same domain name, but there's going to be a lot more information in the weeks to come. So pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com. Check them out. All right. Now, sorry about that. Back to this ownership. And again, I'm way afield, but I want to talk about this. And this, as I do the show, if you listen regularly, I always say, I try to think of hot topics or issues that come up and talk about them. I have many ideas sitting here on my legal pad for show ideas, and I have them all listed here today. And here, what do you know? I start talking about the work I do in estate planning and dividing estates. I get sidetracked, but this is really good information because it surprises me as I meet with clients and as we talk estate planning issues, it surprises me that a lot of people don't realize this. And sometimes, and this happens in all fields, that whether you're an accountant, whether you're an attorney, or whatever your job is, you tend to think that the people who you're dealing with or you're representing may have greater knowledge or understanding of some of these issues because you deal with them so often. So it surprises me at times. I talk to people and they don't realize this. So let me go back. Like I said briefly, a company, our quick example, in case you're just joining us, signs a lease with you as the landowner. The company, making this simple, has 85% interest for royalties. You have 15. Well, lo and behold, you get this notification, typically, sometimes you're not even notified, that the company has assigned a portion of their lease to another company or companies. Sometimes we see 4 or 5 different companies that now hold the company portion of the lease. Well, similarly, you as the landowner can do the same thing. Okay, so if you have a lease and you have 15%, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And I mean, really, in some ways, well, you're limited by law, but in some ways you're limited by your imagination. You're limited by what you want to do. So, do you want to assign a portion or give away or transfer or sell a portion of your lease? Say you have 15% interest, you could configure it that you're giving 5% of that interest to another individual. If you have 3 kids, you could divide your lease up into 3 different ways, so each one gets an equal share. You can do so many different things with your portion of the lease. So you can do that while you're alive. You can do that through your estate. And when you're looking at this through an estate, remember, I just gave you the example, and this is really super critical. The example of you have a lease and talking about dividing or separating the interest in that lease. However, that lease is for your oil and gas rights. So that lease at some point in time, now it could be soon, it could be in 50 to 100 years, it will terminate. So if you only assign a portion of a lease and that lease then terminates, well, you didn't assign, unless you do it differently, you didn't assign the oil and gas rights indefinitely or permanently. You assigned a lease in this example. So it's really important to understand that too, because if you assign a lease and for some reason maybe that lease expires and you didn't think it would expire, well, what happened? When that lease expires, those oil and gas rights go back to whoever was the original owner, you as the landowner, unless you have separately provided for the transfer or sale or assignment of the oil and gas rights. So if the lease terminates and all you did was assign or sell a portion of your lease, well, that assignment or that sale would terminate. Did you or do you want to make a permanent sale or transfer of your oil and gas rights? All right, I'm up against it here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Again, kind of got a little off track of where I plan to go in this show, but this is important. So I'm going to talk about this some more, about the transfer of assets, wills, and estates a little bit. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And hey, Rick, hello. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I want to get back to my intro for a second before I talk more about the estates and the oil and gas estate. But as I indicated, I represent landowners and only landowners. gas lease negotiations, pipeline, waterline agreements, royalty and royalty deduction disputes. We'll be talking about that more here in shows coming up. Estate planning, which I'm talking about some here today. Gas lease amendment and modification issues. Pipelines, of course. I think it's comfortable to say that I've probably done more pipeline right-of-way agreements on behalf of Pennsylvania landowners than any single attorney over the last 10 years, whatever time frame we want to pick. But again, I think that's safe to say, but who knows? Also, I talking some, and I wanted to get to, and hopefully I still can, some well pad agreements, these surface use agreements for well pads. Very important. If you're approached for a well pad, I don't care what type of lease you have, you should consult with an attorney, find out what your rights are. It's one of these things, and here I go breaking a little bit, but you say you get a well pad agreement, and you say, well, I don't have a very good lease, I'm not sure what I can do, just go ahead and just sign whatever they give me. Don't do that. Don't do that. Even if you have a bad lease, have a consultation, sit down, understand what your rights are. Make sure that you're not giving up anything that you may have in the lease. Maybe you can scratch and claw and get a little bit more by signing an agreement with the company. Maybe you can get your clean and green back taxes paid. Maybe there's some other things that you can do. Maybe you do not have indemnification, meaning that in your oil and gas lease, there's not indemnification language. So if, God forbid, there were an accident, perhaps then you could be sued. Maybe you didn't do anything, and you certainly may not be held liable, but you may incur expenses and sometimes even substantial expenses to defend this type of lawsuit. So just because you may think that you have a poor lease, have a consultation, find out what are my rights. And that's not something that's going to take hours and hours and hours. It's probably going to take an hour or so, maybe two. Get to the bottom of it. What are your rights? And then if you do have rights, which many people do, well, make sure that you're not giving anything away. Make sure that you're getting the benefit of all the bargains that you've made previously, and make sure that any bargain that you make moving forward is going to be the best bargain or agreement that you can make. Because the guy coming to your door is not going to tell you these things. He works for the company. So you need to make sure. And it's one of these things where if your rights are limited and you're limited in what you can do, well, then it doesn't cost very much to find out. It's not a hard process to find out because there's not much that can be done. But you know whether something can be done, and you have some answers. And then maybe there wasn't something that could be done this time, but the next knock at the door, you're more informed. And so maybe there is something that can be done. So maybe you're limited in what you can do, but maybe you're not. And those are answers that you need to get from an independent source who's working, not even independent, who's working for you, not the gas company. And then you also have information where, again, that next knock on the door, maybe that's a pipeline that you don't have to agree to. And that if you want to agree to it, you can negotiate the terms and get much more compensation potentially. You can have more input into the location, the number of lines. Is there going to be anything above ground on your property? But you can maximize that situation. So just because maybe you can't do something now, but maybe you can. But even if you can't today, you might be able to do something in the future. Landowners, please do not get into the habit of signing documents that you're presented without finding out independently on your own by somebody working for you what your rights are. Because then you're tagged as this landowner who will simply sign agreements that the company presents. You're on their list. They're going to come to you every time they need something, and they know, well, Mr. Jones, he'll sign things, and you're never going to get the best deal. You're never going to get the best deal. You're never going to be told generally whether you can or you can say no to this agreement if you don't want it. They know that you just signed things. That should not be any landowner's reputation. Should not be. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. I want to remind everybody, check out pagasleaseattorney.com. It is up now, renovated, revamped, better than ever for sure. So check it out, pagasleaseattorney.com. You can also go listen to the radio shows. Check out the blog section. I'm in the process. I'm going back through all the blogs that I've written previously and updating them, bringing them up to speed, making them more current, because some of them are written in 2010, many in 2010, 11, 12. Well, I'm going back, I'm revamping those as well, editing them and bringing them up to speed, because I say this often and I can't say it enough. When you're getting information, especially if you're getting information online, or you're going back and listening to some of the radio shows. I've been doing a radio show since August of 2010, weekly radio show since August of 2010, so approaching 5 years. Well, if you listen to the first radio show in August of 2010, that's not going to have the same relevance as this week's show will have or last week's. So you need to make sure that the information that you're getting is current and quality information for your situation. The circumstances have changed drastically and continue to change. It's the same thing for the attorneys. Somebody who's just dabbling in this stuff doesn't deal with it every day, doesn't understand the change in the marketplace, doesn't understand what might have been good advice last year, 2 years ago, or even 2 months ago is not good advice today. And that's a really important thing, because I get it all the time. Landowners call, have my first talk with them. We have a conference, telephone conference, in-office conference, and have to explain to them that some of the things that they may be thinking, some of the advice that maybe neighbors or other landowners have given them may not be the best advice, or in many cases is not the best advice or information for their current situation. And one last time on the land, man, they work for the company. They're not giving you this advice. You need to make sure that you're getting it, and it has to be current, it has to be relevant, and it has to be credible. Again, I am Attorney Doug Clark. This is All Things Marcellus, here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And also, you can always contact the office. This will be my last part of this, but you can always contact me at 570-307-0702. It's 570-307-0702, no matter where you are in the state. I just had a client signing a lease. Quite frankly, it's one of the highest per acre bonus leases. One of the highest per acre bonus leases that I have ever actually worked on. And so when you hear all this stuff, well, the gas prices are so low, we're doing this, we're doing that. Well, that's true, but it's also very convenient for the company to say those things to try to reduce the offer and get lower offers, whether it be gas or pipeline or other facilities. Well, they point to the price of the gas. Well, remember, when the price of gas goes up, remember that. Do you think they're going to change and say, oh, well, you know what? Since the price of gas has gone up in 2015, we're going to give you a lot more money. You're not going to hear that. You are not going to hear that. So keep all of those things in mind. All right. Stepping back again. So I was talking about the first segment. I was saying I've been doing more and more estate planning work, and going to continue to do more estate planning work as clients of mine are transitioning and other landowners transitioning to the royalty phases of the lease. This isn't the wills and estate planning show. There'll be some of those coming up with more information. But one of the things I wanted to touch on that got me thinking when I was talking about that is the estate of the oil and gas. So what happens is, and you can kind of look at this, and this is a simple way to look at it and say, okay, well, you have the property that you own. Say you have a 100-acre farm, and this could be if you had a 5-acre house, a 10-acre hunting area, a 200-acre, you pick it. But we'll just make it simple. I like round numbers. I'm not the best math guy. So 100-acre farm you have. Well, on your farm, you have a house, you have a barn, you have some other facilities, other buildings, sheds, things of that nature. And you have, obviously, ground that you're walking on, and then you have the subsurface, underneath the surface. So you can, as a landowner, you can assign or transfer or sell either the subsurface or the surface, and you can do that kind of in various combinations. So you could say, okay, well, and this happens a lot too, maybe you're not in production with your property. So you're not exactly sure of what the value of this asset is, the oil and gas asset I'm talking about. So you say, okay, well, I'm thinking about, maybe selling the property, maybe moving to Florida, doing something, getting out, maybe downsizing, whatever that case may be. And you say, but boy, if I sell this property and I sell these oil and gas rights with the property, which is what most people have done for the last century plus, you sell your property to somebody, you sell them what's called a fee simple. I don't know why we call that, but it's a fancy term that lawyers use, saying, okay, you own this property in fee simple. I would say you own everything, surface, subsurface, down to the center of the earth. Well, that's how it's always been pretty much done in most places in Pennsylvania. You sell a fee simple estate to somebody else. So, okay. Well, what we're seeing a lot of now is instead of selling this all that you own, you're going to sell, maybe you say, well, look, I don't want to be down in Florida, or maybe I don't want to go to a different area and downsize my house. And then a couple years after I sell it, find out the person who bought my property is making an exorbitant amount of cash based on royalties. So what are we going to do? Well, most people selling property in Pennsylvania in these gas-rich areas, most, not all, are keeping the oil and gas rights. So if you sell the property to another individual, you keep the oil and gas rights. You also could sell the property and some of the oil and gas rights. You could sell the property and keep all of the oil and gas rights, or obviously you could sell the property and include the oil and gas rights. Without going into these details, but depending upon how you do that transaction, it's certainly going to impact the price that you're going to get in this sale. So if you sell property that has the oil and gas rights, in my example, a 100-acre farm, you're going to get more money in that sale than you are if you're going to sell this 100-acre farm and keep the oil and gas rights. But most people, and again, this is something where you have to look at your area, you have to look at your situation, a lot of considerations in order to make the best decision for your situation. You may be in an area where information tells us that it's probably unlikely that you're going to see any oil and gas development in the near future. Then you have to weigh the price of this sale. Is it worth keeping the oil and gas rights because you may end up seeing a big reduction in the price that you can sell this property for? Or is it better to go ahead and sell everything and get that additional money up front today, because overall in the future, you know that there's probably not going to be any oil and gas development in the near future. So those are all factors that somebody with knowledge of the industry, as far as your representative, can assist you and help you. You don't also want to be kind of thinking, okay, well, I see this a lot too. Landowners are frustrated. They say, I haven't seen anything, I'm getting older, I don't think anything's going to happen. Well, in some areas, maybe that's true. However, whoever's telling you that, or whatever you're seeing, you got to look at this, because the person who's going to buy the property, they're going to upplay that. People also don't have a lot of access to the information as to what's going on with the company and how soon things may be developed, and they're frustrated, and there's a lot of people out there looking to prey on these people and take advantage of their frustration. And we see that a lot with these companies seeking to buy oil and gas rights from the landowner. So you got to be careful about that too, because the landman promised you in 2006, 7, 8 that you were going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams, that you were going to be the Clampetts, and this was going to be, everybody was going to be millionaires, and that hasn't happened. Maybe your frustration level shouldn't be as high as it is. However, maybe that your area doesn't show a lot of promise right now, and that's where good advice is going to assist you. I'm up against it again. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You can always contact me, 570-307-0702. I'm going to finish up this oil and gas estate talk, this next segment, and I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. Again, I'm here every Sunday on these stations from 8 to 9 a.m. Also, go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. We'll have the radio show up and available tomorrow, Monday. Visit the websites, the pagasleaseattorney.com, all new, revamped, renovated, great information. Encourage you to check out the blogs. working on those. And my intention is to get a new blog up, I'll say this, at least every month, but my goal is a little more often than that. You can also, and we don't send out a ton of newsletters. You can sign up on the website for the newsletter, and when I have a story or like an article or something that I write that I think is really valuable that people may want to check out, we send that out in the newsletter to people as well, or we have an announcement or anything to make, we send those out. But I assure you, your email box is not going to get jammed up with a bunch of junk email from the Clark Law Firm. It's not what I do. I certainly don't like to see that. I get a lot of emails in a day, do a lot of work through email, and I don't like it when I get a bunch of junky emails and things cluttering up my box, and I certainly wouldn't want to do that to other people as well. But, maybe every couple months even, you may get an email. If you're interested, you can get a newsletter, and send it out there, and we limit those to what we think is very important information that may be of value. And you can always let us know if you wanted to be removed from the list, we can take you off. But just something to check out. Again, pagasleaseattorney.com, also pipelineattorney.com. I am working on similar renovations to the pipeline site, which I again, don't like to make promises I can't keep. But let's say I'll set a target date at the end of February, maybe beginning of March, that we have the pipeline site up and renovated as well. And so going to have a lot of information there. Talking about pipelines, one thing I'm doing now, a lot more representation, because there's a lot more of these projects, these interstate pipeline projects. I kind of call them FERC lines, FERC, for Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And what that means is, and it can be through the PUC of Pennsylvania, but the idea is that these projects have a very strong chance, and pretty much about 100% chance, of getting the power of condemnation or eminent domain. And quite frankly, those are bad words for landowners. So, if it's your property, those are absolutely bad words for landowners. If you get that notice, you need to at least, again, have a consultation, understand what your rights are. Is the landman coming out and talking to you going to explain to you how to make the best of this situation? Are they going to do that? Well, they may represent or try to represent that that's what they're going to do, but are they really going to do that? I don't believe they are. I'm going to talk some more about these FERC lines here at today's show. I apologize if you were hanging on at the edge of your seat wanting to hear about well pad agreements. I'll make a special star here in my notes that I talk about that in the next couple weeks. But what I want to finish these estate issues here for a second. And then I'm going to talk very generally about these interstate projects, like the Constitution project that was just finished. We have the Sunoco line. Several landowners and people have called me to retain me for that. We have the Atlantic Sunrise project going on. So if you've been approached, okay, whether it's me or somebody else, call somebody that knows what they're doing. Call somebody that can help you understand your rights and formulate a plan that is going to get you the best possible agreement or the best possible situation as an end result, the best possible end result, I guess I should say. You need to get a plan together, and you need to get that done with somebody who's going to work for you, not work for the company that's seeking to install these pipelines. I want to finish the estate. I'm going to talk about this more, so stay tuned on this. Okay, I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. Just kind of finishing up on this. I said I'm doing more and more with estates and estate planning, and one of the things that often comes up that surprisingly to me, and I'm sure many people do know about it, but a lot of people do not understand their ability to separate the oil and gas rights from the surface of the property, and in their estate, in their will and in their estate plan, they can divide up these rights, which can be a very, valuable asset depending upon a lot of circumstances. How many acres? Where are you located? But you can really divide up these rights, and you can direct them: children, grandchildren, trusts, if that's right for you. And it has to be right for you. A trust isn't right for everybody. Absolutely not. You got to get the situation, you got to get the plan, you got to get the vehicle, you got to get what is right for you and your circumstances. Don't get sold some Rolls Royce of estate plans if you do not need it. Get what you need. Hopefully we can design, or your attorney can design something that can grow with you, or you say, okay, here's what I need today, but hey, we need to revisit this in 5 years, 10 years, or maybe sooner, depending upon what occurs with production. There are so many things that you can do as a landowner and an owner of these oil and gas rights that many people are unaware of. You need to get that information, understand what you may be able to do, and then decide what is right for you. How many times do I say, and I will always continue to say this because I believe this is a life motto of mine, if you will, that get the best information, get information, become educated for yourself, get the proper assistance, and you will make the right decision for you. So, if you find out about all of these different things that you may be able to do, and I'm talking about oil and gas rights and dividing them and things of that nature today, well, you learn all about that. You understand those things. And you decide, you know what? That's not how I want to handle this. That's not what I want to do. Maybe I just want to, when I pass away, I want to give the property to my children, and I don't want to divide the above ground and below ground rights. I just want to give it to them as equal shares, as what's called an undivided interest, so you can't separate the interest. So whatever is produced and whatever royalties there are go to the children. But then you need to understand too, well, what do we anticipate what may happen in the future? Maybe you don't want to give the oil and gas rights away because maybe your concern is, or as far as assigning the oil and gas rights and separating them, maybe you have a concern, well, if I do that and I give 25% to my church, I give 25% to the Humane Society, I give the other 50% to my sole child, well, what if that lease expires and now there's a new lease to be signed? Well, the company's going to go out, and now, instead of if you getting it all to your child signed the lease if they wanted to. Well, now there's going to be a lease that's going to be presented to your child. There will be a lease offer you would expect presented to the Humane Society, one to your church. So those are other things to think about. I could do shows and shows and shows on these subjects. So you need to become educated, be informed, understand what your options are. What is the chances that what your neighbor did, or somebody at the church, or somebody at the diner, or somebody at the local hangout, wherever that may be, what is the chances of what they did is exactly what you should do? What are the chances that they're in the same life situation, that they have the same assets and debts that you do, that they have the same acreage, that they have the same family structure, that they have the same intentions and desires that you do? What are the chances of that? In my opinion, they're very, very small. So you are an individual. You need an individual plan for you and your family. I know for me, I have two boys, 120, 117, and I want to make sure that my plan is in place for what I want for my family, my wife, my two children. Not, hey, Mr. So-and-so, hey, attorney friend over here, what did you do? Okay, that's what I'm going to do too, okay? That's not the way your plan should be constructed or designed. It should be designed for you because you're an individual with individual needs, and your family has specific needs too. They need to be addressed, and you need to understand your options, think about your options, and make a plan that is right for you. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. All right. I want to turn back. I said, I'm going to, and I apologize because I plan on talking about well pads today, and I got all sidetracked on the estate stuff and the subsurface estate and the surface estate. I'm also now, another hot topic are these FERC lines or these major interstate lines that are going, and what happens is, look, gas is being produced and more gas is going to be produced here in Pennsylvania. And in many areas, there's a bottleneck where there's gas being produced or it's about to be produced, and there's not sufficient pipelines to get the gas out. And so companies are sitting on gas and not having the pipeline capacity to transport their gas. Also, what do we see? Well, we see that because there's so much gas in this particular area, that the price of gas, you can look at the price of gas nationally, and many of my clients do, and they'll call and say, I looked and I saw this Henry Hub price. I saw this index price, and it was $4, but my gas is being sold at $2. Well, the local sales price, when it's being sold locally at interstate pipelines close to production, well, that price is going to be lower. And so, because there's so much, it's just simple supply and demand. There is so much supply locally. So, what is going on? Well, economics at work, supply and demand. We're starting to see these companies come in, and we're seeing more, and you're going to see more. Constitution, Mark I, the Sunoco, Atlantic Sunrise, these projects coming in to expand the interstate pipeline capacity, going from state to state, going from Pennsylvania to New York to Massachusetts and the Boston area, going out to Maryland, going out to the coast, looking to go ahead and export some of this gas and natural gas liquids. So what comes with that? Well, these major pipeline projects. And as a general rule, I tell everybody in the first time when I meet with them and speak with them, when their approach for these projects, look, there's almost no chance at the end of this you're going to walk away being very happy. Now, you may, but because of this eminent domain and condemnation backstop, that the companies are almost definitely going to get it. And this, again, we have to look at your case. That's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to get $100 a foot that we sometimes can get in more in specific negotiations when eminent domain is not a factor. However, that is not at the end. You need to understand what are your rights and how do you maximize what you're being offered. How do you get the most money and try to limit the impact as much as possible with what is being presented. I'm going to talk more about this because actually something came in my head too. I see these agreements that people signed in 1950, and I can go back in time on my mind and just hear it. The guy at the table, a landman, same thing. Hey, look, you're going to do it anyway, so go ahead and sign here. We're going to do it anyway. We'll have eminent domain. They'll have eminent domain. Sign here. Now, they don't do that so aggressively today, but some of them do. Well, what happens now? These people who signed these really bad agreements from the 1950s and even closer, but see a lot in the 1950s, 1960s. Well, they were bad agreements. So now the company comes in, and these companies are installing these lines under these same bad agreements because they allowed for multiple lines and all these different rights. And those people now, the owners of those properties, which some are children of the people who signed, some are the people who signed themselves, they're suffering because they didn't go and find out their rights and get the best deal they could at the time. I'll be right back. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark, here every Sunday from 8 to 9. We're right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, here every Sunday from 8 to 9. You miss any of today's show or any of the other shows dating back to August of 2010. August 2010, we're coming up on 5 years. Check out pagasleaseattorney.com. Check out pipelineattorney.com. We got a bunch of the shows up. We're working on bringing more shows online. When we did the new website, there's a process where we got to get these shows up, and it's a time process. So we're getting more and more shows up there. So you can go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. Miss any of today's show, we'll have that show up here, or we'll have today's show up tomorrow. So talking some about, I'm going to give some general advice here, and I think this is really important. I've been contacted several times this week, and new clients with the Atlantic Sunrise Project and the Sunoco Project. And here's some good information for you guys. If you're approached for one of these pipelines, these major pipeline projects, the first thing always, do not agree to anything. Listen to what's being said to you. Get whatever information they're presenting and say, okay, I'm going to think about this. Then you need to contact somebody with experience that can assist you and have a discussion, and the consultation maybe is the best first step. And then decide, let's get a plan together. What am I looking at? What can I do? Don't just simply say, well, they're going to get eminent domain. They're going to do whatever they want anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and sign. I would not do that. There is a way and a process that you should undertake for your situation to go through this and to make sure that you at least do the best you can. Don't just throw your hands up and give up. But maybe it's not that you want to start pouring money into an attorney and going to war either. What is right for you? Let's get a plan together for you. Let's figure out, what are your rights? What do we anticipate is going to happen? What have we seen happen recently in other FERC projects, these other interstate projects? What information do we have that we can learn from? What kind of plan, is your case unique than other cases? Is your case a run-of-the-mill case? Then if it is, either way, what's the strategy in order to make the best you can out of this situation? In most cases, and almost all, what my experience is, the landowner isn't walking away saying, woohoo, I'm great, I'm so glad that occurred. That's not what you're seeing. But what you do is you have a realistic expectation. You understand what you're facing. You develop a plan. How do I get the best deal I can? How do I maximize and make the best out of this situation that is not a good situation for me? And there's ways to do that. And you need to talk to somebody. You need to get some assistance from somebody who understands those ways to do that. Also, again, remember, this isn't something that you just want to throw your hands in the air and go ahead and sign. It's also these cases, and I don't want to get too specific on any particular cases, but there's a strategy that I've formed and I developed over doing these that I find it can work pretty well. And it's a strategy, again, which there's no great magical end to this. Every case is different, but there's a general tendency of way these projects develop. So we want to make sure that we use the information that's available to, look, if it's going to happen and you don't like it and you don't want it, and your choice is do this for $30,000 or do this at $40,000 or $50,000. Again, I'm making these numbers up. Well, if the same thing's going to happen, who would not rather have some additional compensation? So what can we do to try to make sure we're maximizing your money? What can we do? Now, at the same time, any good attorney, and certainly I'm aware of this, we don't want to sit there and see you get a big legal bill that's going to outweigh any benefit. So the idea is, okay, let's formulate this plan. Let's formulate this strategy. How do we handle this? How do we make the best of this situation? Then, do you agree? Do you understand, landowner? Do you see what we're talking about? Does this answer your questions? Now, let's implement that plan. Let's implement that strategy, and let's walk through this process together, and let's get the best deal and make the best that we can out of this situation that nobody's happy about. Look, I tell people typically in my first meeting or conference with them, if it's by phone, these are my least favorite files to work on, because generally speaking, the landowner, no matter what, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to walk away and say, wow, I'm really glad that happened. But if handled properly, you can walk away and say, well, you know what? I understood what my rights were. I understood what my limitations were. I understood where I could make this better, and I got the best I could out of this. I did the best I could, and I can sleep at night, and I'm not happy about the whole process, but I am happy that I did everything I could to do and to get the best agreement, and to make sure that I didn't leave any money on the table as much as we possibly can, and also to make sure that we protect the property where we can. And it's always, for every client I ever deal with, I want to make sure that you have from the beginning a realistic expectation as to what to expect. Don't promise the world and then disappoint somebody. Explain to them, I promise I give my best efforts. That's my promise. But I want you to know, here's what you can expect. That with my best efforts, here's some realistic expectations. And then you decide how you want to handle things. I am Attorney Doug Clark. This is All Things Marcellus, here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. talking about these interstate FERC lines, eminent domain, condemnation. If you're in this situation, you need to contact an attorney. You need to understand what your rights are. Here's one thing too, and I don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to do other shows on this topic because I think I probably got between 5 and 10 calls this week in these type of lines. So what I want to make sure that people know, one thing that as of this moment, and I'll give my disclaimer, nothing is advice for any specific individual, but as a general rule, if you're approached about one of these FERC lines, these major lines, and that landman or that company representative wants you to sign an option agreement, an agreement that says, we'll pay you this little bit of money up front here now, and we'll pay you some more money later if we do it. If you're approached for an option agreement, in my opinion, all these people who sign these option agreements are going to be very disappointed, because I cannot imagine that you won't have the opportunity, and please understand that this isn't specific and this isn't a guarantee, but I would never, ever sign a pipeline right-of-way option agreement that's going to give the company a couple-year option for one of these FERC lines. I wouldn't do it. Here's a little hint, ladies and gentlemen, a little hint that, and as a general rule, and this is a big hint, people who sign first tend, I'll say quite a tendency, do not get the most money or the best deal. People who sign first do not get the best deal as a general tendency. So if you're going to sign where they haven't even submitted the paperwork for approval or consideration, and you're signing an option agreement, the tendency is going to be, in my opinion, every disclaimer I can put out there, but the tendency is going to be that person who signs that type of an agreement, that option agreement, is not going to do as well as somebody else in the future, or the vast majority of people who sign ultimately in the future. I just do not see that occurring in the vast majority of cases, in my opinion. Please understand, I apologize for all the disclaimers, but I need to do that. But if you're approached and you're sitting there with a pipeline right-of-way option agreement for a FERC or an interstate line, call me, okay? I'm going to just flat out say it. Call me, 570-307-0702. It's worth the call. We can talk about it. I can just, even if it's a consultation, you need to have a plan to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. I only have less than a minute, but I want to say this. I talked to a land guy this week, one of these type of cases. He says to me, oh yeah, I'm going to stop out at your client's house next week. I'm going to stop out there. I promised them I was going to bring them some bread, and they're going to have breakfast together. Well, why is that occurring? Why is that occurring? Because this guy's such a nice guy? Well, maybe he's such a nice guy, but I'll tell you what, that's going to be one expensive slice of bread or loaf of bread. That will be one expensive loaf of bread that you're receiving as a gift, because they're trying to endear themselves to you to get you to sign a very poor agreement. Don't do it, and contact me anytime. Please be informed. Whether it's me or somebody else, please be informed. I am Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. Check out PAGasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Have a great day and a great week, everyone.